Okay, we are now live.
Awesome. Cool. So, hi everyone. I cannot see you during this talk, unfortunately, but if you see this Slido link down below, we'll have a moderator checking out those questions. So, if you want to tell us something, share something with us, ask a question, or anything, feel free to use that link and we'll be monitoring it. So, that is the place to contact us. And then just to kick us off, today we have three different panelists, people in this presentation, varying ages and levels. First being Melissa. Here, Melissa Smith has her PhD in human factors and applied cognition, which is super cool. And she is currently a senior user experience researcher for Stadia. You can correct me if I'm wrong, at Google.
Yep, Stadia.
So that's Melissa. Melissa has also, as you can see from her picture, been a ref. She's done FIRST since like 2007. And so FIRST has been a big part for Melissa. Megan here, you can see on top of a drawing, just earned her Bachelor of Science in Cognitive Science from UC Berkeley this year. She is a campus ambassador at Berkeley. She's the Operations and Education League. She's also been a marketing intern. And as we all know, post-graduation this year, she's also looking for job opportunities in marketing and copywriting. So that's sort of where she's at. And then for me personally, the youngest here of the crew, I was a team captain on 971 in 2017. You can see me here with Megan in the pit at Champs last year. I'm currently working on my bachelor's in engineering at Harvey Mudd, aiming to graduate next year. And I've also been a mechanical engineering and robotics intern at Auris Health, where I'm interning this summer, and previously at Raytheon in their Space and Airborne Systems department. So that is sort of an introduction to all of our panelists. And then for some background, we're sort of going to talk about our journey through FIRST and how it relates to our career and our education.
How did Ginger find these photos of me? What the heck?
So I went on a bit of a Facebook stalking expedition to find some pictures of us early in our FIRST career. So we're going to talk a little bit about our path, how we started and joined FIRST, and sort of how that has led us up to where we are today. So for me personally, you can see I am this young person on the left. I was part of an FLL team. We were the Ludicrous Lego robot team or something, the Ludicrous Legos. So you can see we had a cool wrapper on our t-shirt. And FLL was really the first time that I did engineering. And then from there, in middle school, high school, I continued taking math classes and science. I really enjoyed it. And then finally in high school, I stumbled upon FIRST. And so FIRST is sort of the first actual opportunity I had where I was doing legitimate engineering. I was part of a team. I had responsibilities. I was working on projects. And it was a super, super rewarding experience. I learned super valuable skills like SolidWorks, team management, engineering, machining, mechanical design, and all these great skills were skills that I took with me into college and beyond. And so part of that opportunity is really what inspired me on my current educational career path. So I study engineering, and a lot of that, I will say, is due to my experience with FIRST. That really inspired me. And so that has been a big part of my education and hopefully career, because currently this summer, I'm also interning at Auris, which is a surgical robotics company. Now we're part of Johnson & Johnson, which is really exciting. And so every day there, I work with my peers, many of which I actually knew in FIRST, but we'll sort of get into that later. Megan, do you want to go ahead and tell us your story?
Oh my gosh, my story is a little wonky. When I was a sophomore in high school, I had a science teacher introduced me to robotics. My dad is an engineer at Boeing, so he was a mentor on the team that you can see in this photo. But the team that I was on in high school retired, so then I joined 3309, the Fryer Bots in Anaheim, and I was co-president of that team. I helped them earn their first chairman's award, then which helped me actually get into UC Berkeley. At Cal, I bounced around a bunch. I was super indecisive in my major, in part because of how attractive 971 can be in showing how cool robots are. So I thought I wanted to study computer science. I took some really hard physics classes because, that's just how it was. But then I really found cognitive science. I really fell in love with psychology and the way that people work. And I was also really in love with Berkeley, so I wanted to become a campus ambassador to share that passion with people. And it really highlighted my abilities in communication, writing, speaking, and just sharing with people in general, especially projects that can be inaccessible like robotics. I really enjoy helping as many people as possible find their passion in robotics. So currently I'm looking for jobs in marketing and copywriting, like Ginger mentioned at the beginning of our intro slide. But hopefully one day I can just get paid to write, and that will take me a bunch of places. So I know a lot about business and how to make teams work properly, and I feel like robotics gave me so much confidence to be uncomfortable with myself and be uncomfortable with the future, and just something really useful in general. And that's part of the reason why I want to be on this panel to give this talk. So I can pass it over to Melissa.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Melissa. My first journey actually started 20 years ago in 2000 when I was on an FLL team. But I always joke about the story because in my middle school, there was like an after school fair, and my friend said that we should go to the aerobics club. And I was really skeptical about going to aerobics. Turns out it wasn't aerobics, it was robotics. And I was very excited to have been wrong in that case, because robotics was a lot more fun. And obviously 20 years later, I'm still having fun. So yeah, I started with an FLL team in middle school and then went to a high school. I picked the high school based on the robotics team that they had, which is kind of exciting, down in South Florida. And after I graduated from 4 years of FRC, I went to University of Central Florida, partly because that's where the Orlando regional was held. And we got to tour it all 4 years of high school doing robotics competitions. But also because I was like, oh, I want to do robotics and I want to be an astronaut and I want to go to space. And UCF has a lot of fun connections to Kennedy Space Center. And I was just completely bought into all of it. So that's why I went to school for initially. I went in for mechanical engineering, but then found out about human robot interaction, which is a subfield of human computer interaction, which is a subfield of applied cognitive psychology. And I was like, oh, wow, that's actually what I really want to do. Being able to like figure out like why people work better with robots and what situations, and like how to just make tech better in general. So I switched over to a major of psychology with a computer science minor and started doing research in human robot interaction as an undergrad. And then I also did research with the Navy as an undergrad, and I was like, oh, this is super cool, working at the Navy and getting to work on human computer interaction and human systems integration work. And then found out, I was like, okay, this is what I want to do, and you need to be a PhD to be a scientist for the Navy. So I went to George Mason University to get a PhD in applied,
no big deal.
Yeah, applied cognitive psychology. And midway through grad school, or all through grad school, I was still very much involved in FIRST. That's actually when I started refereeing, and then started head reffing halfway through grad school. And now I still very actively both referee and head referee at different events globally now, which is super exciting. But I changed paths from going down the Navy route and switched over to industry with Google, mainly because the government kept shutting down in grad school, and I didn't feel like not having a job. Congress didn't figure out how to make budgets periodically. So I was like, what else is out there? And then found out that Google hired cognitive scientists. So I've been with Google 4 years now. Initially, I was with YouTube for 3.5 years. And recently I switched over to Stadia for the past 6 months. So it's kind of fun getting to like how this, like, of course, looking back, it feels like a very linear journey, but along the way, it's been very chaotic at points and very just like confusing. But throughout all of it, FIRST was a big part of it. And I talked about FIRST a lot, and it's just been a really awesome journey. And I have lots of great memories. One of them being in this picture here, where I got to meet Woody Flowers and one of our former astronauts, a NASA astronaut. And this was at that point, it was called the DC Regional. Now that's technically part of the Chesapeake District, but it was super cool to just be like able to meet like really cool people through this organization that I literally stumbled into.
Yeah, I think Melissa also forgot to mention that she was like recognized by first
Wait,
along
we'll
with.
get there. We'll get there.
Oh,
We'll get
oh,
there.
that's like a sneak peek. I'm sorry. Spoiler alert.
So
Oh, here
anyhow,
we go.
Oh my God.
we had to brag a little bit about Melissa.
We do.
Melissa was actually invited to the first Inspired Gala in 2018, which was honoring literally Jeff Bezos and Melissa. And so you can see here just in this one screenshot of the invitation with Melissa's, it still blows my mind the fact that your name is just under Jeff's, like no big deal.
I
Like,
think they messed up. They should have put Melissa first and then Jeff Bezos.
yeah, I don't see anything related to first in Jeff's description.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like still one of those surreal like pinch me moments where it's just like I said, this was kind of just a after school activity that I like just happened to really love and just wanted to stick with. And it's opened up so many doors for me. And it's mainly just because I always talk about it. I literally, wherever I go, whenever I meet someone, people always like, they always like introduce yourself. And I'm always like, oh, I'm a scientist. I work for Google. I really like robots. But about that, I also spend a lot of my time volunteering with FIRST. And then I just give a spiel. Like it's a K through 12 nonprofit aimed at getting kids excited about STEM. And then they're just like, tell me more. And then it's just opened up so many doors, literally. So it's pretty great.
Cool. So here's sort of our after photos from the before, as you saw earlier. And I think Melissa and Megan did a really great job sort of summarizing the points that we really want to bring out. So some of you may know, and some of you may be students watching this stream. And the message that I think I definitely want to portray is to take advantage of every opportunity that FIRST has. On 971, we really like to say that what you put in is what you get out, if not more. So you sort of get like definitely a return for all of the effort that you put in, and it's super worth it. Dean Kamen used to say this, which is that in FIRST, every student can go pro. So a lot of students love sports. I definitely did. And that's a big part of a lot of people's lives. But unfortunately, sports for a lot of people eventually has to end, either due to age or you go to college and you graduate. But FIRST is really awesome because it's a team where you can love it and learn and be there and then take it into your life, into your career, your education, your job. It's an extracurricular where, like I said, you can go pro. And furthermore, FIRST has amazing connections, skills, opportunities, and you can really leverage these to pursue your goals. So if you're an alum, whether that be graduating and volunteering at events, mentoring a team, appropriately for what you're capable, given your time and your space, and sort of reaching out to alumni. It's an incredible network and it's really important. And I think also Melissa, who, in her journey of, going to the Navy and then to Google, really also shared that I think FIRST is awesome because it promotes a sense of lifelong learning, which is really important. Even as a mentor and as a volunteer, we're always learning. We're part of sort of like an educational community, researchers, writers, students, and that is really cool. So you can see here now in college, I, am a rising senior, like I mentioned, and my friend Seth and I actually decided to start a RoboSub team at Harvey Mudd, and we made it to the semifinals our first year at the competition in San Diego. So you can see here, this is our robot. I think some like 20% of teams make it to the semifinal. It's like a point cutoff, to be fair. So, but it was still really awesome because the robot worked. It's an autonomous competition. And that's sort of like an opportunity that I never would have been able to have without the skills that I learned from FIRST. And so that has been really pivotal for me. And you can see here, Megan being a campus ambassador at Berkeley, sharing her story, leading operations there on that team. And that's really something that she was able to do because of the leadership and the organizational and writing skills that she was able to develop so early. And then finally, we see Melissa at Google in San Francisco, super cool. And again, a lot of that sort of helps, all of this FIRST really pushes us and is a big part of our lives. So we are going to end the screen share now, I think. This is our last slide. Make sure to go to the Slido link if y'all are listening. Use the event code #Spartan Series, #Spartan Series. And we really want this to be just a super open forum for those of y'all watching. So anything you have questions about doesn't have to be related. It could be about college, career, internships, if you're in high school even. And we'd love to sort of do our best to answer them and talk about our own personal experiences because we're super passionate about this.
Yeah, I guess just to add on while people ask their questions, I just wanted to say that, sometimes things like social media, especially Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, Twitter, all of those things really make it seem like people who succeed in life do it instantly and that they don't fail in between. But I have failed so many times. I have stumbled, I have made mistakes. But I think because of robotics and because I had this huge network of people who were always going to be there for me and support me, because of that network, I just have so much more like oomph to try new things and to be brave in the world. And so maybe something that Ginger and Melissa want to talk about is like how they feel like they changed because of robotics and what robotics gave them to do all this awesome stuff in their future, because they are so much cooler than me.
Um, I think one of the things I love about First, and I always talk about this as well, is that obviously I think it's really easy to point to like the technical skills that you get from First, like how to use different power tools, how to build a robot, all the different subparts that lead to building a robot, the tech skills, the programming, all of those. But more importantly, I always say the more important skills are like the other skills, and people refer to them as soft skills, and I hate that phrase because it feels like, oh, it's like not that important, or it's like smushy and not, but those are the things that are more important. So things like being able to communicate complicated ideas to people in a way that's easy to understand, the skills like being able to work with others to come to a consensus to solve a problem, the skills about being able to actually push through on tasks. So you set tasks, but then you actually have to complete them like in a sequence, and like planning that out. Things like being able to, I would say, being able to lose gracefully and pick up and just keep going. Like these are skills that you take for granted learning in First, but apply so in so many areas of your life. And I think I personally attribute any like success I have is to having like parents who really encourage that from like a young childhood, but then also like being able to learn that stuff in First, like being able to learn the skill set early in life, because I think it's one of those things. I can attest to this as a grown up. There are many people who have not learned many of those things, like about having how to peacefully disagree or just like work together as a team. These are, and I think having to learn that or being able to learn those skills pretty early in life through robotics can only benefit you no matter what field you go into, even if you're not necessarily in STEM. So I've always said that those are the skills that I truly appreciated the most learning from First early.
Yeah, I think for me, definitely, I think there's an important distinction between sort of the opportunities that different people receive and sort of who they are as an individual. Like, I think that for me personally, like, I definitely have like been super appreciative of the opportunities that I've had to be on 971. And I think that like what it's really taught me is everybody, like I don't want to like succumb too much to the American dream trope of like work hard and you can get where you want. But I do think that something that I've learned that's really important is like when you do get those opportunities, the best thing you can do is to capitalize off of them as much as you can. And so it's really about like being self-reflective and aware of, like what is valuable, like what is a good use of my time, like what are sort of who are like the good people that I want to surround myself with so that I'm surrounded by people who are intelligent, ambitious, and kind, and generous, who will sort of help me along my path just by nature of like their proximity. So finding those good people, I think, is really important and also helps a lot. And that is sort of what I think First, often does naturally is by, I think people say like the robot is like the fire that we gather around, where it's like really about the gathering of the people. And I think that is like a super good point.
Yeah, I
So,
think. Oh, sorry. What were you
oh, I
saying?
just like the point is like, I have been like, in addition to all the things that I've been able to do, like it's also a lot due to like luck and the people around me and, the ability to put yourself around those people, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I I just really resonate with a lot of what Ginger and Melissa said, especially when things can be so uncertain right now just because of the pandemic and COVID-19 and like our economy. Um, and just being able to leverage what you know in first and the people that you meet in first is a really valuable skill. So that's kind of what this talk is about. Just because like I feel like I've met so many cool people and I've heard so many cool stories about kids like Aaron Hill who come from like who knows where in
No.
you know where, Ginger?
Illinois.
Illinois.
Iowa.
Okay, Iowa. It's one of those I states that my tiny brain doesn't remember. But like hearing stories about Aaron posting on Chief Delphi about all the cool things that he's making and like all the cool projects that he's working on. And then to see him, you know, be like this battle bot leader designer and teach my best friend Ginger all about how to design. I'm just showcasing them because I feel like that's a really cool story. Like that's a really good example of like how powerful first can be. It can really just take you to places so far outside of your comfort zone that they turn you into like really cool leaders and engineers.
Yeah. So I guess in relation to that, we have some Slido questions. And I think sort of totally related to this, one of them is, do you have tips for how to stay organized, knowing your network, and how to go about networking in general?
I could talk about the networking part of it, just because organizational skills are still something that I'm working on. But in terms of networking, I really try and be intentional about it. I never network for the sake of like having somebody in my address book or Facebook friends. I always try and do it really purposefully of like getting to know somebody and getting to build a really genuine connection with them. And I think that's something that takes time and practice and like just being really authentic in your interactions with people. People kind of get a sense if you're just getting to know them for the purpose of like what they have to offer you, but that's kind of lame in comparison to like the connection that you can form with them. And I guess in relation to organization, I love Google Calendar. I put everything on Google Calendar as much as I can, but I still have something to work on.
Yeah, I think a good way to stay like organized also with regards to networking is like similar to what Megan mentioned, as I think like listening attentively and asking questions when you meet people is a super cool way to build those relationships and meet new people. Because in addition to forming a more genuine connection, it also allows you to better understand what kind of paths they took, what kind of sort of opportunities they may be able to present you with, because you get to sort of understand what they're doing and what they're into, right? So really asking those questions, I think, is super productive. And another thing too is like once you've sort of asked those questions and have gotten to know somebody in that way, another part of sort of utilizing your network is, again, stealing one of Megan's words, being intentional, right? Like, for instance, like reaching out to somebody for an internship opportunity, it may be more effective if you have a particular reason or interest or skill set you feel could align with the opportunity or company that that person already works with. So for instance, rather than reaching out to somebody and saying like, hey, like, can I intern for you? Maybe elaborating and saying like, hey, I know you work on medical robots and that is super cool because I've done robotics for 4 years and I do robotics in college and I love robotics. And I also know that you mentioned you are a mechanical engineer, which is great because I also study mechanical engineering. These are the skills that I can relate to you, like, you know, and sort of also leaving them like an open door, right? Like, oh, like no big deal if you don't have any opportunities for me. I would appreciate any advice you have, time to chat, or maybe you could point me in a different direction, or if you have colleagues and so on. And so there are all these sort of other ways that you can do that, if that makes sense. So I think those would sort of be my big pointers.
Yeah, 100% agree with what Megan and Ginger just said. I think people hear the word networking and they assume like, oh my God, I need to go like, just like shake as many hands as possible or just like schmooze with people and just like essentially just be fake and be disingenuous. And I think that the concept of networking, yeah, it needs to be more natural. It needs to just be like, what are you interested in? So like, for instance, I always say networking should not be oh, let me just randomly add someone on LinkedIn. It should be like, oh, I'm going to a conference and I read up on I find the talks that I'm interested in and I go up to those people afterwards and ask them questions about it. That's a very natural way to start a conversation and like get people interested. And I say at a conference, this can happen at robotics competitions as well. I don't know if you guys notice this, and I don't know when we're going to have this again, but eventually we will. But, there's that whole panel of blue shirts of all those judges that get invited as to judge your robots and your teams at competitions. Or also almost every volunteer at the competition, typically, they are over 18 and have connections and work life and just interesting interests outside of just like robotics that you're in, obviously you're all in the shared environment. Just strike up a conversation with these people. Like, it was one of the things I did as a student. Like I remember when I was a student, this seems so funny, but I was a safety captain. And every year, all 4 years, we were at the Orlando Regional. It was Florida Regional at that time because they only had one, but now it's Orlando Regional. And there were the two safety judges from Underwriters Laboratories who always came, and every single year I would go up and just be like, hi, how's it going? Good to see you back. Thanks for your volunteering and good to see you. And it was just one of those little things. Like I never wanted anything or out of it. It was just more like just being friendly, but they recognized me. They were super excited every time they saw me. And then later on, when I was in college and coming back and volunteering, these same like judges were there. And it was just like, now I'm like, oh wait, now I'm a college student. I could potentially get an internship with UL if I wanted to, just by having had like said like hello and nice to see you to these judges. I never did because I wasn't in that form of like engineering, but it's just one of those things where it's like all of these typically volunteers and mentors are there, and obviously they're there and excited about robotics too. So it's the easiest thing in the world to go up and just be like, hi, like thanks for volunteering. I'm so and so from this team, and what brings you to robotics? Like, why are you like, what are you doing here today? Like, just learn more about like, what do you do? Or ask people and just be genuine, show genuine interest and be genuinely interested. And just, I think that would open way more doors than you would expect. And I will say too, one of the reasons I volunteer, now I volunteer because I love it and I'm always in it. But like when I was in undergrad, just starting volunteering, I needed a break from mentoring my team. It was like a 3-hour difference and just like kind of far to try to still be mentoring from a really far distance. So one of the reasons I started volunteering was to just stay involved at first in little ways, but not necessarily be right on my high school team. And it was a great way of just like making friends and just meeting other people at the university. And those are people I'm still now friends with years later. We are now, of course, scattered around the world. And a lot of us are still involved at first. But, that's a form of networking as well. Just like kind of getting involved and just staying in touch with people. So,
that's a great point. I think like definitely out of the scope of this presentation with regards to like mentoring after graduation as a means of staying involved, I think a really great way to stay connected to the community is to like, I love attending kickoff because it's in my winter break and it's always like super busy, and there's a lot going on. So that is super fun. And then like Melissa said, volunteering is super fun. I think a lot of regionals often align with spring break potentially while you're in school. And sort of these like small but very impactful opportunities that allow you to stay connected to that community year after year without like a crazy time commitment or like, like you said, like a huge commute or anything like that. And I think another thing that's super important too with regards to like networking and stuff and just like career advice in general, and something that I've been sort of more passionate about recently is about like advocating for yourself as an individual. I think people fall lots of different places on the spectrum. So the first step really is doing a bit of self analysis and reflection on sort of maybe where you fall, because there's certainly people who sort of undersell themselves. I think that can be really common. And of course, you don't want to be in the opposite direction either. So like I said, there's a long pattern of that spectrum. I think for me personally, and I think often certain like potentially underrepresented groups in STEM, it can feel really difficult to say like, hey, like I'm qualified, I'm good at this. Like, do you have an opportunity for me where I can contribute? Because I feel like I would be a really good team member. And it's super important to learn how to value yourself and to know your worth and to be confident in that. But again, to not be overconfident and to continue to sort of be humble and be a lifelong learner, like we mentioned, but also to sort of know your worth, I guess.
Yeah, that Ginger, that's something I really struggle with. It's still something I struggle with today. I had to have one of another 971 mentor actually looked at my resume the other day and was like, Megan, you need to just like own this a lot more and like just be more action oriented in your accomplishments. So I think Ginger gives really good advice about like just owning your experiences and just being confident in how you overcame your own challenges.
On the Slido, we have, let's see, if we have great observations, Megan, good advice, Ginger,
Oh,
and
nice.
great tips on how to leverage competitions, Melissa. So lots of
Oh my
positive.
gosh, I love it.
Yeah. Here's a question I think is interesting.
Okay.
What impact would mentioning first in an interview, on a resume, application, or similar document have on your overall first impression? I'm guessing of someone if they.
Yeah, I think this can differ a lot depending on what stage of your career you're in. I think maybe all three of us can speak to having been at different levels, like new grad, a little bit new, like, you know, been in the industry for longer. And then for me as a student still, I think we have a good sort of range. I think like it definitely depends on sort of what context you're mentioning first in. As a student, I think it's important to move beyond first. I know that's like really hard to hear, but I think like how can you take those skills in first and apply them at sort of like a college level? So I think some schools have like VexU teams, or there are robotics teams that are related to, sort of more of a collegiate level. Or it could just be research, on campus research, or it can be an extracurricular, or it could just be through like a design class and really spending your time honing those skills. I think like growth is a really big thing, because when you're a student, your resume should be about like your ability to like learn and do new things and to learn new skills and what you can capture. And so while I think it's really important to mention on your resume, I think unfortunately from like an employer perspective, people often want to know what you've done after high school. So even though it can be a really big part for you, I would say leverage it as potentially a new college student to get those opportunities in like research labs. I know professors may, especially like engineering professors, may love your hands-on experience and want to hire you for research activities. So I think you can leverage it earlier on, and then you'll want to have other things. And then Melissa and Megan can probably speak into this more, but I think you sort of get into a point where you have like enough industry experience that first becomes like a volunteer type of activity. And that I think has like a different sort of connotation than like the actual sort of like engineering resume, technical experience side, if that makes sense.
Right. So I guess just for me, because I'm not in a technical field, I have to provide like a brief overview of what first is. But people, as like, because I'm a mentor and a volunteer, people really like that I do things outside of school. And because I volunteer, it shows that like I really care about something like beyond myself. And you'd be surprised that employers actually do really care about that. My dad, actually, I mentioned him earlier, but he's like a senior mechanical engineer at Boeing. He hires people, he interviews people to be on his team all the time, and he looks for first experience. He actually has hired a couple first alumni because he could tell tangibly just from their interviews that they were so much more prepared, that they had so much more team working experience than just so many other applicants. So if you leverage it to be more about problem solving and communicating and kind of like emphasizing that the soft skills are hard, like Melissa was mentioning, it can be super powerful.
Yeah, so I'll just add to what Ginger and Megan said. Yeah, I'm at the point in my in my career where I have had first on my resume the entire time, like starting in high school, and I have it on my LinkedIn. It shows right there. I've been involved for 20 years, you know, like, and it's one of those things where, yeah, it has become more of like a volunteer role for me, but it is such a big part of my life that I always make an effort to mention it, or if it doesn't come up by itself, because it does typically come up. If people don't know about it, they'll ask about it, and people do know about it, then it's an obvious way to fill a lot of time during any kind of conversation, whether it be an interview or like just, I don't know, any kind of conversation that you need. So I always have it on there. I think it's a great way to show the breadth of skills. I've gotten many like coworkers to start volunteering with First, because I just have it on like my internal page, and like I'm actively involved in like internal groups that are like relating to First and First alum and stuff. So I think for me, it's a really big part of my life, and I always make a point to mention it, because whatever job I have, it's going to be a part of my job. You know, like I tell, whenever I switch teams, I've switched teams twice now at Google, and one of the first things I tell my new manager is, hey, glad to be on this team. FYI, come March, April, there's going to be a few Thursday, Fridays where I'm just not going to be here because of robotics. Let me tell you about it. In fact, you should come to competition. In fact, we should get everyone here volunteering for it. And you know
Amazing.
what? It works because people are interested, and no one's going to be like, no, don't give back to the like future like generations of kids. No, it's exciting.
Yeah.
And it's a fun, like the program sells itself essentially when people get involved. So I mention it whenever I can, and I have it on my resume for sure. But yeah, it's definitely in a volunteering experience capacity, because I have other things on my resume now. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think a good way to summarize it, perhaps, and you guys can feel free to correct me if you disagree, is like First can be like a big part of who you are and how you've grown in your resume experience. But I think it's important to not let it become like what defines you wholly. So I think like you can do things beyond that, pursue a career and an education outside of it, while equally sort of utilizing that network and those skills and like displaying them, because they can only benefit you. But it's important to sort of think what more you can be as well, because there's tons of opportunity.
So yeah, another question we had, I think we touched on this a little bit before with the networking question, but how have you used First Connections to get internships?
So I can probably relate to this because I was hired by my first mentor for a college internship. So I was a student on 971 for many years. No, not many years. Literally not many years. But I was a student for what felt like a long time. And after I graduated and went to college, I continued to sort of stay connected by volunteering at competitions, going to kickoff. We have an alumni potluck, just like saying hi when I'm in town. And then from there, I just asked, I said, hey guys, like, what's up? I was wondering if you had any openings or opportunities, and if you could potentially refer me, if I could interview. And actually what's interesting about that is I asked after my senior year. So between high school and college, I actually asked if that was an opportunity that I could potentially do. And unfortunately, all of the positions were filled at that point. They had already hired for all of the spots that they had. And I think what's important about that is like, sometimes you can ask and they might just not have availability, and that's totally fine. Or maybe you're not a good fit yet, because you got to remember that you're competing against, people that have 3 or 4 years more college experience. It's got nothing to do with you. Sometimes it's just about, the luck of the draw. And so then I just asked again the next year, much, much earlier, because I was, obviously too late to the game the previous year. So I asked and I was like, hey guys, can I, intern maybe? And I was super grateful. They said yes. And so that's how I got that opportunity. And it was really cool because I was able to work alongside some of my mentors that I had in high school and continue that same like lifelong learning, continuing to grow and gain experience. And that was really cool. So I guess in terms of like how to leverage First to get internships, there are lots of companies that know First. So like sponsors, there's job fairs at the First Championship. And I think some companies even go to events. I think at a career fair as well at your school, you may never know who might know First. So like mentioning it on your resume is always cool. And I think that like asking your mentors and alumni potentially, I don't know, like different teams may have different types of alumni networks. I know 971, we work really hard to have a strong alumni network. So we invite them back for a potluck every holiday. and like love to have them for kickoff and so on during break as well. And I think your alumni network is cool because you can also, some of them may be younger and you can talk to them about where they're working and if they can maybe push your resume along. I've had some other fellow 971 alumni submit my resume to a few places through sort of like the internal network. And that's something that's really easy for people to do, I believe, because they can just sort of like submit it through some internal network they have. And it might be slightly less involved. But those are sort of a few different ways, I guess. That's what I can speak to personally.
When I was applying for internships, the place that I worked at, Legion, was pretty impressed with my confidence and my ability to communicate just because of robotics. And I think that goes back to what I mentioned earlier, just like owning what you've done on your team and what you've done for the FIRST robotics community in general. I've had some friends who've interned at like NASA JPL. Code Orange is another team in SoCal that does a lot of things with medical device companies. And so they have a really strong connection there. That's something maybe Ginger can touch upon. Citrus Circuits does a lot of cool like internships, I think maybe through UC Davis and through their solar powered robotics stuff. And I know that, for example, 971 with Blue River and Peloton Technology also have a lot of like feeder sort of like unofficial feeder type programs. So also just like reaching out to the mentors on your team to see what opportunities they had for you. And I may have kind of been fuzzy on these opportunities, but you can definitely just talk to your mentors and see what they know as well.
And like, don't be afraid to ask questions. I think sometimes you may feel like you are currently underqualified and may not have the experience, but that doesn't mean you can't say like, hey, like what advice do you have for me? Like, what should I do if this is an opportunity that I want? Like, what should I learn? What classes do you think would be best? And like, you know, like this next season, you know, say if you're like currently still an FRC student, like what should I do in order to better have access to those opportunities? I think that's super cool and can be helpful. But I think generally also just, you know, being a great team member, learning a lot as a student, all sort of comes hand in hand, even in terms of getting internships outside of First Connections. Because having the, you know, if you can be really strong at SolidWorks, that is a great, great skill for getting any internship. If you have tons of software experience and you've written, you know, maybe developed some projects through FIRST that you've done on your own, like software companies love to see projects when hiring interns. So you can totally leverage that as well. So I think it all sort of comes around to that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll just repeat what I said earlier. Talking to mentors, like Ginger said, keeping in touch with like your network, like both Megan and Ginger said. And I would just come at it from a different point where it's just like, talk to the judges, talk to your fellow teammates, talk to the people you are at competition with, use competition. Like it's fun, it's social, it's busy. There's a robot, obviously, but these are people who you are going to be seeing either in person or remotely for the rest of your career if you guys all stay like connected. Like I said, I'm still good friends with people I was on an FLL team with when I was in 6th grade, you know, and even if it's not like a connection where it's like, oh no, I'm like a sophomore in college and I need an internship, like you're not going to go to your fellow sophomores in college to get an internship. However, you have a full career ahead of you and you'd be surprised how many connections you make. Like I'm now well out of undergrad, but I now have friends who are also like professionals in other fields and in other companies. And it's good to know that if I need to, I can just be like, hey, what's up? Like, what are you doing? What's your company doing? Like, oh, do you guys like, tell me more? Like, let's chat. Let's keep, like, we've kept in touch, you know? So I think that just think about the fact that you're establishing these relationships for life. And even if it's not necessarily gonna be something you lean into right now, it's something that you can in the future, and vice versa. Be open to helping the next generation coming behind you, because that's the whole point of this organization. It's building up the next generation and getting everyone excited about STEM.
Yeah. Seems like a lot of what we've talked about too broadly is sort of just about like forming meaningful and strong relationships and friendships with people as well. So I think there's, you know, except with the flavor of career and profession, you know, on the side. So
Cool. Okay. I think we've answered all these questions in some regard, but like, what career advice do you have for high school and college age students?
I think I would try to learn as much as you can. Like the best thing you can do for your career is make yourself like as valuable of an asset as possible. So learning as many skills as you can and being open to new opportunities, whether they be within the field you're directly related to or interested in or outside of potentially. Um, Pretty much I feel like almost everything I've learned in college, you know, you're sitting in that class and you go, man, I just want to be an electrical engineer. Why am I sitting here taking this digital electronics course, you know? And then here I am 2 years later at my internship, like looking at encoder signals, which is sort of digital electronics. So now I'm like, okay, cool. Well, like, you know, even though it's not related to what I wanted to do, I took it as a learning opportunity, you know, passed the class in order to graduate, obviously. And then here I am utilizing that skill through like a job, which is really cool. So I think learning as much as you can makes you like a really valuable asset, and college and high school are the place for you to develop that foundation, and education is super important.
Yeah, I guess my advice would be to be as introspective as possible. Ginger touched upon this earlier about knowing yourself and really like self-analyzing. But introspection is like this cog's high tactic psychology thing of like thinking, taking a moment to think about your needs and what you want. And using introspection to also think about like your weak points and where you can improve, and just constantly being on this like drive to ask yourself like how can I be better, how can I help more, and like what am I interested in, and just being okay with leaning into that whenever you can. And if even if you're really passionate, you know you want to be an engineer, you know you want to do XYZ, just don't be afraid to try something new anyways. You know, like I'm 22 and this is like blows my mind how much more time I have to be successful and to like accomplish the things that I want. So even if I like take a side path to getting there, that's okay because I still have so much more time. Like college and high school can kind of be like this trap of like, oh my gosh, I need to graduate and like, oh, I only have this certain amount of time to do those things. But in reality, you have so much more time. And like I'm just trying to learn to be patient with myself in this process of like self-reflection and understanding. I hope that was somewhat coherent for you to understand, and I hope that was advice.
Totally.
Yeah, I mean, I'll echo what Ginger and Megan both said. I think the advice I would give to high school and college students is to just keep absorbing. Like, I'll just rephrase what Ginger said. Just keep learning, but also absorbing, and just like kind of be okay with chasing your interests. Like, I think that it can be, there's a lot of pressure in society to be like, oh, you need to, you know, get it. You need to go to school, graduate, go to college, graduate, get a job, get money, buy a house, you know, like do this. So like, it can be really hard to just be like, oh, I'm going to pursue this fun hobby on the side or do this thing because I just purely enjoy it, because people are going to constantly be pressuring you to be like, that's not going to make you money, or like that, you know, it's really hard to succeed there. And just my advice is to just still do those things, still pursue them, find ways to like create, like find ways to incorporate the things you enjoy in addition to the things you need to do, because one, it's like it's fun to be able to pursue the things you like, but two, it's good for inspiration. It's good to like have these outside sources of like something completely different that's unrelated to maybe your career or your schoolwork or your job, and just be like, oh, I'm doing this purely because I enjoy it, but also I could potentially you like the intersection of like really random topics are really interesting to see, like the innovations that come true. I always remember the example I always talk about is there was like a really epic design that they made for a solar it was like a solar panel that they were putting on the satellite that was going up, and it was inspired by origami, like the way that it folded down and to fit into storage and then was able to unfurl was inspired by literally by origami. And that's something that you wouldn't like. Those are two very different areas. Origami is like this form of art, you know, it's an art form. You're using paper and you can fold it in different ways, and it's very inspiring, but it's not something that you would never necessarily think about in like, you know, the physics involved with like trying to transport you know, a really large solar panel in as small of a space as you can. But someone like, you know, who was super excited about origami and also is an engineer was able to like meld these two areas together. And I think that the intersection of different types of topics are super exciting. And I think that when you're in high school and college, you have more time to really lead into those areas and really like just soak up as much as you can. So that would be my advice.
I think also, sorry, go ahead, Megan.
Oh, Melissa, what you said reminded me of our love for Hamilton, and like just that story of like just following that story of like an art and passion really helped me become a better writer, because I was like, wow, I love Alexander Hamilton. He was like this crazy writer dude. He used his writing to get to where he was, and like that, and just being passionate about Hamilton really motivated me to like want to become a better writer. So I think that was like the first thing that came to mind when you mentioned like keeping your other passions alongside with you too.
Yeah, I think particularly with regards to this question about high school and college as well, like the cool thing about when you're young is, like Megan said, you have a lot of time. And so I would really just like, if you hear of something that sounds interesting, or maybe it just sounds like even a mildly piques your curiosity, like just try it. I think that's like super important. Like, put effort into it, give it like a genuine shot and try it. And I think it could be really cool. Like, for example, at Harvey Mudd right now, my very first year of college, my RA at my hall, which was somebody named Nathan, he was the president of a club called PEP, which is the Prison Education Project. And he sort of encouraged all of us frosh to go teach math and science and engineering classes in a prison, like an actual prison. And I was like, wow, that's crazy. And I'm a freshman and I have no idea what college is for me, but like, I'm just going to try it, like that sounds cool. I'll sign up, right? No big deal. And it was like really cool. Like that sounds horrible, but like, it was just like an incredibly eye-opening opportunity to see people that, are from a completely different walk of life. But I think it is so important, going to like a small private liberal arts college in Southern California and having an immense amount of privilege to be able to get an education like that, going somewhere and teaching a class of like 20 incarcerated women something cool about engineering, which is both inspiring, fun, and cool for them. It's like not only rewarding for them, but it was super cool for me. And I think that both like increased my worldview in a way that's really invaluable, but it has also taught me how to explain engineering related concepts to people with no background at all, right? So like, how do I take that engineering related thing and I'm explaining it to people who have no idea what's going on and getting them excited and stuff like that. So anyhow, I really liked that. And I think that relates to sort of like just saying yes and trying it.
Definitely. Okay, so we have one last question on the Slido. If anyone has any more, please go to slide.do and you can use Spartan series to add more questions. But how did FIRST help you decide where to go to college? I'll just mention, because I already mentioned it earlier. For me, I decided to go to UCF, University of Central Florida, because I had spent 4 years there going there for the Orlando Regional for robotics. I'm not kidding. That's literally why I chose UCF. Well, that's why I applied to UCF. I chose UCF because they gave scholarships and I really wanted to work for NASA at that point, and UCF had lots of NASA connections. So there were multiple reasons why I chose to go to UCF, but one of them was definitely because of robotics. I was just like, I just spent 4 years here. I saw how cool it changed, and like they had expanded it and added this cool food court and all these beautiful dorms. Like every year you went back and there was more stuff added to the school. So it was like, hey, I just like spent 4 years here anyway, might as well spend 4 more. But yeah, so yeah, FIRST definitely helped because it allowed me to tour colleges. Oh, and directly, I will say I got a scholarship from IRI because I told that story about how I like mixed up robotics and aerobics in the essay, and then I got a scholarship from the in Indiana Robotics Invitational, which is like a big off season, and that was also able to like go towards the school of my choice, and I was like, okay, UCF, thank you.
For me, Berkeley was always my dream school. Just before, just even before robotics, I was on the wait list, but robotics made a huge difference in my application. If for waitlisted students, there was like an additional essay that you can write. And because 3309 had won the chairman's award, I like had the audacity to compare myself to Aaron Rodgers, who's like, you know, quarterback for the Green Bay Packers, and like me, 5'3", comparing myself to him. Okay, Megan, like slow down. But the essay that I wrote was like best essay I've ever written. I don't think I've written anything better since. But robotics was like the tool for which I went to Berkeley. So I really didn't intend to stay involved with FIRST while I was at Cal, but c'est la vie, and it really worked out for the better for me, and I probably still would have volunteered anyhow.
I think I do a lot of thought on college and education related things. I'm like super I don't know, big nerd for that kind of stuff. And I think the most important thing as I'm going through it right now personally is focusing more on what and why a school is a good fit for you rather than looking at sort of its prestige and its acceptance rate and then being bummed. I think it's actually much more effective to find maybe 3 or 4 schools that you're really excited about, and then potentially also some of your in-state institutions that are also really great. And I think that can also help. One thing for me personally, as I am a rising senior, contemplating what I want to do this next school year, especially with COVID-19 and everything, and looking into whether I want to go into a job or if I want to potentially pursue grad school and academia, maybe even, I mean, who knows? And I think like your undergraduate institution matters a lot more if you want to go to academia, not necessarily in prestige, but in sort of like your GPA and your money. I think Melissa mentioned scholarships. That's a big deal. If somewhere is going to offer you a huge first scholarship, like definitely put thought into that. I think that's a super big deal. If you want to pursue grad school, the money you save there can make a huge difference in enabling you to pursue further education, because college is already really expensive. And also sometimes I had a math teacher in high school who I really loved. I had her both junior and senior year for all of my math courses. And she used to say that there are multiple studies that say being in the top half, being above average at like a average ranked institution or like a second tier institution. I mean, that doesn't sound great, but is actually those students actually perform better than the students that go to a university where they are bottom of the class and struggle a lot and, you know, don't have that opportunity to thrive and learn because they're constantly struggling. And so that's also really important, is finding a school where you'll be able to learn and have a good fit and be able to thrive and succeed.
And I guess I'm really good friends with Michelle Long, who's the first alumni liaison at FIRST headquarters. She'd be very upset with me if I didn't mention there are a lot of FIRST alumni groups at different organizations at different colleges now. So definitely like check out the FIRST alumni network in general, and that could just be a fun way of like just having a group of people to automatically just easily be able to bond with at your university. Again, I still keep in touch with University of Central Florida friends and fellow alums, and the UCF alumni program is huge. And again, it's because that's where they host the Orlando Regional. So a lot of high school students who go to who spend years going to robotics events there end up like going to UCF, and they love it. And the UCF FIRST alum group is pretty active, and they do a lot of volunteering together. They also volunteer at the event, obviously, because it's right there. So I mean, just if that's something that's important to you, definitely look into the alumni groups at different, and there's a lot more of them now than when I was in college, and that's super exciting because again, it's just like kind of a built-in group of people who are familiar with kind of the different types of activities you've enjoyed up until that point in your life. And college is kind of stressful, so it's fun to have like friends who are familiar with what you might be interested in. So Cool. Okay, we don't have any more questions, and it is 6 o'clock. So
I think that ends us on a great place.
Yes.
thanks everyone for passing in questions to us. And I mean, this is super fun. I hope you're enjoying the Spartan series, and I hope you tune in for the next one tomorrow, which will be earlier because it's in the day. Yeah.
Saturday session.
Spartan Saturday.
Camera calibration.
All right.
Okay.
Have a great weekend, everybody. Bye.